What a difference a day makes. 24 little hours. We've seen in that first part of this 24 hours that who we identify matters, and that God rules the universe and our allegiance to him brings life. And the application to us so far has been ally yourself with God and live. Now, even in the capital of the Persian Empire, which is 1,000 miles from Jerusalem, God's covenant promises to his people still stand. Haman the Agagite have been executed, and we are seeing things turned on their head. And as we move into chapter 8, it's still the very same day. We see the hidden hand of God powerfully at work to redeem his people in a book where, as we remembered, his name is not mentioned once. Now, it's been my experience that God is often most powerfully present even where he seems to be absent. So we're back in chapter 8, and Queen Esther knows that she and her people, her family as she now refers to them as, because she's now Esther the Jew, are still facing annihilation. So she begs the king to put an end to the evil plan that Haman the Agagite had devised against the Jews. And once again, the king extends his gold scepter to Esther, and she asks for an order to be written that overrules or cancels Haman the Agagite's decree. But this only happens after another astounding royal reversal. Let's look back at the passage in verse 1. That same day, King Xerxes gave Queen Esther the estate of Haman, the enemy of the Jews, and Mordecai came into the presence of the king, for Esther had told how he was related to her. The king took off his signet ring, which he had reclaimed from Haman, and presented it to Mordecai, and Esther appointed him over Haman's estate. And Mordecai has been exalted now to the highest position in the Persian Empire, and there's been a significant change in the capital. Everything will be different now. Mordecai's service has been vindicated. Now, King Xerxes responds to Esther's plea and says, no decree can be revoked, but another decree in the king's name can be written to counter the first. And so it is that Mordecai writes a counter decree mirroring Haman's first decree, and the edict is symbolically sealed with the king's signet ring. Let me read you from verse 11. The king's edict granted the Jews in every city the right to assemble and protect themselves, to destroy, kill and annihilate the armed men of any nationality or province who might attack them, and to plunder the property of their enemies. The day appointed for the Jews to do this in all the provinces of King Xerxes was the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar. So the counter decree was issued, and it permitted the Jews on the very day as Haman's decree ordered the destruction of the Jews, for them, the Jews, to assemble and to protect themselves, and to destroy, kill and annihilate the armed men of any nationality or province that might attack them. And this decree, amazingly, was written on the 23rd day of the month of Sivan, for enacting on the 13th day of the 12th month, which is Adar. That's 9 months away. And importantly, the power base in the city is now differently. Remember, there's been a political coup, and God's man is now in the place of power. What a turnaround, you might say. What a reversal of fortunes for the Jews. God is in control. And so the couriers deliver the edict to all the provinces, and we're told in verse 13 that the Jews would be ready on that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. Well, this has been an epic reversal of fortunes for the Jews in Persia. And as we look ahead, there was happiness, joy and gladness and honour as the edict went out. What a contrast that is to chapter 3 when, do you remember with the Jews, they were doomed as Haman's murderous decree was issued in the city of Susa, where everyone was bewildered. But it's clear when we look at this passage that God rules the universe and allegiance to him brings life. Now next week, we come to the final chapters of Esther. 9 months will have passed, and we'll hear what happens as the 13th day of Adar arrives and the edicts are carried out as we finally see the redemption of the Jews in Persia. But let's pause there for a moment and ponder something about these decrees and counter-decrees that we see in the book of Esther, and think for a moment about how they point ahead to Jesus. Remember, just as we see Mordecai issue a counter-decree to enable the Jews to defend themselves on the 13th month of Adar, likewise, as we saw hinted in the 321 film, so the God of the universe has issued 2 decrees. And he cannot simply cancel the first decree of death pronounced in the Garden of Eden against humanity. Instead, God makes a counter offer of life. And God's counter offer of redemption resulted in the incarnation of his Son and that Son's death on the cross. The Bible says that all humanity is one with Adam, but God invites us to become one with Jesus. Because he had become human for us, he could take our sin and selfishness on himself when he died on the cross and offer us forgiveness and love and reconciliation, as we heard earlier in that film. Here's John 3:16 again. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish, but have eternal life. So don't miss God's counter offer of life. It's on the cross that God's love and justice are finally reconciled. And incredibly, Jesus takes the full extent of the wrath that we deserve on himself. And that's quite remarkable, amazing love. And remember that Jesus didn't stay on the cross. God raised Jesus to life after 3 days, and he is seated at the right hand of God now. And if we follow Jesus, we too will share in his glory and victory. So will you entrust yourself to the God who rules the universe and remember his counter offer of life? Let's have a moment of quiet before we sing our final song. Well, wonderfully, as we've seen this morning, our God saves and protects and is faithful to his promises, as Esther and Mordecai witness. And our allegiance to him and his Son Jesus makes all the difference in life and death. So we can sing these words, can't we? I will glory in my Redeemer, who waits for me at gates of gold. And when he calls me, it will be paradise, his face forever to behold. Let's sing this final song, I will glory in my Redeemer.